English 4433, which is Studies in Restoration and 18th Century Literature. It can be on any special topic, and so when I teach it under this special topic, 18th Century Masculinities, or my new course that I've proposed, which is Gender Trouble and Transgender in 18th Century Literature, it's that same course with this special topic. There's some overlaps between these two course ideas. The 18th Century Masculinities course, it falls more under the T in the LGBT studies for the transgender, in that it's an exploration of the many different kinds of masculinities that were constructed in the 18th century, the 1700s, including female masculinities. We spend a lot of time in the beginning of the course on a short story by Henry Fielding called The Female Husband, which is about a woman who becomes a man and feels more comfortable as a man. And so he marries women, is a kind of a serial monogamist, and the story, as I see it, really calls into question this idea that gender is natural, and it shows gender as a performance, and it shows that George Hamilton, who's the protagonist, who used to be Mary Hamilton, is not only as much of a man as the other men in the story, but that he is in many ways more of a man, because his performance of this certain kind of masculinity, and it's a classed masculinity too, he's a doctor, so how this constructed masculinity is no different than any other form of masculinity. It's just that George Hamilton is better at performing it than others, and he gets punished, the so-called female husband, aka George Hamilton, at the end of the story. And so the students, we spend some time discussing, whether this is Fielding, the author, punishing this character for being transgender, or whether this is Fielding showing the inhumanity of man to man in punishing somebody for doing what everybody else is doing. And there's no wrong or right answer to that. It's ambiguous, like many things. So that's an example of the kind of thing that we discuss in this class, and we look at the many different kinds of 18th century masculinities to show that there was no such thing, just as there isn't now, as masculinity. Masculinity never exists in any culture in the singular. There are many different kinds. They change over time, and they're all a matter of performance, as gender is. So the class is really about destabilizing gender by focusing on this very specific literary historical period, which is my area of expertise, the 18th century British literature. But we also read some queer theory and gender theory and trans theory. Really good discussions. A lot of close reading. We spend a lot of time dissecting specific passages in texts. I don't like to talk around a text. I like to speak specifically about particular moments. We spend a lot of time looking at title pages. So this, for instance, is a the facsimile title page of the Fielding's Female Husband. And we spend a lot of time analyzing the title page, looking at, how, for instance, so here, this is The Female Husband, or The Surprising History of Mrs. Mary, alias Mr. George Hamilton, who was convicted of having married a young woman of Wells and lived with her as her husband, taken from her own mouth since her confinement. It's written as a kind of testimony, as a history. The word history is here, appears really big letters on the page. It's not called, short prose fiction. Now, this is based on a true story, but this is Fielding's fictionalized account of it, and yet, and this is very common to the period, it's packaged as a true story, because that's what readers wanted, even when they knew that this was a fiction. Part of the fun of it was to feel like they were holding in their hand a real life, recent historical artifact. So we spend a lot of time looking at these facsimile copies, and I have them read many facsimile copies as well. We don't read everything in facsimile, but I like them to get a sense of what this literature actually looked like back in the day.